What's up YouTube? Seth here. Welcome back to Bat Slayer MMA. I'm back with another fight breakdown video. This is my third one. The last two, GSP versus Michael Bisping and Chris Cyborg versus Holly Holm. They both had over 1,000 views in less than a week. They both had a lot of comments, a lot of great feedback from you guys. So I definitely want to start the new year with another fight breakdown video. Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou. Alright, so let's get started on the main event. Number one, size. Now this one is definitely going to go to Francis Ngannou. Even though they're both 6'4", Ngannou does have a 3-inch reach advantage. He has about good 10 to 15 pounds on Stipe Miocic. But if you just physically look at them, Francis Ngannou is a much bigger man. If you saw Francis Ngannou versus Alistair Overeem, he made Alistair Overeem look like a weight class below him. And Alistair Overeem is not a small guy by any means, but he was physically a lot bigger than Alistair Overeem. And Alistair and Stipe, when they were face to face, they're about the same size. So on the night of the fight, definitely in the cage, Francis Ngannou is going to be the bigger guy. He's going to be the much bigger guy. Even though he only has about 10 pounds, and even though they're both the same height, he looks like he has like 20 pounds at least on Stipe. So the size advantage is definitely going to go to Francis Ngannou. Number two, striking. Now, on paper, for significant strikes, Stipe lands about 5 significant strikes per minute, whereas Francis Ngannou lands about 3.4. They're both fairly accurate. Stipe is at 50%, Francis is at 47%. Their defense is pretty much identical, but take a look at the punches absorbed. Stipe is about 3.3 punches absorbed per minute versus Francis Ngannou is only at 1.46. And one thing to notice about Francis is that he is extremely patient. Even in his early UFC fights, he was extremely patient. He does not chase his opponents. He's out there, he's stalking his prey. The Predator. I mean, that is a great nickname for him. He doesn't get hit a whole lot. He only had 6 fights in the UFC, but really no one has really tagged him clean. Stipe does have an amateur background in boxing. He's a Golden Gloves champion in boxing. Is more traditional. He throws more straight shots. Francis Ngannou throws more looping punches, especially that left uppercut or even that rear uppercut. He goes all the way down and brings it all the way up. They don't really throw a whole lot of kicks. Stipe doesn't really check a whole lot of kicks, and Francis Ngannou doesn't really check kicks, doesn't really check leg kicks either. So they're both boxers in a sense. I don't know who has a clear advantage in the stand-up department and striking. They're very, very similar. So I think I'm going to give actually both of them a tie on that one. So number three, power. Now, I think most people will give this advantage to Francis Ngannou. Out of his 11 wins, he has 7 by TKO or KO. And we all remember that Alistair Overeem highlight. I mean, that was a scary knockout. But don't sleep on Stipe, because out of Stipe's 17 wins, 13 of them have come by way of knockout. But I think the difference between the two is that, while Stipe hits hard, Francis Ngannou hits scary. And I think that's the difference. You got a hard hitter, and I think everyone in the heavyweight division hits hard. Stipe does hit hard, but Francis Ngannou is just a scary guy, and he hits scary. I'm gonna have to give that power advantage to Francis Ngannou. So number four, grappling. Now keep in mind, guys, Francis Ngannou started MMA only a few years ago. Only a few years ago, he didn't actually even know what MMA was. And, it's no surprise that his ground game is lacking. While Stipe Miocic, he came from a wrestling background. He is a Division I wrestler. He is very capable of taking his opponents down to the ground. Even though we really haven't seen it in his last few fights, he has the capability of taking his opponents down and beating them on the ground. Stipe versus Shane Del Rosario. In the first round, Shane was getting the better of Stipe in the stand-up. He was throwing, a lot better leg kicks, body kicks, and he was really getting the better of Stipe in the first round. And then Stipe took the fight down to the ground in the second round and just elbowed Shane really, really bad, and won the fight there. And if you remember his fight against Mark Hunt, he constantly took Mark Hunt down pretty much at will. and beat him up there. So he is capable of taking somebody down and beating them down, you know. And if you take a look at the grappling stats, I mean, again, Stipe, while he is a knockout artist, he does average about 2 takedowns per fight. He's not very accurate at his takedowns, though, only at 35%, but he has a solid takedown defense at 72%. Ngannou hasn't taken anybody down in his UFC fight, but he does have 75% takedown defense, which is pretty good. He has been taken down a few times in his first few fights. So I'm definitely going to give the grappling advantage to Stipe Miocic. Next one is cardio. Now, this one on paper has to go to Stipe. Stipe has definitely been tested in his time in the UFC. He has been through some 3-round wars, 5-round wars. You know, you remember that fight against Junior Dos Santos the first time. That was a 5-round war, a back and forth fight. Even the Mark Hunt fight, you know, even though it was a one-sided beatdown and Stipe was swinging the hammer, he still took that fight to the 5th round and finished him there. So he is certainly capable of going all 5 rounds. Francis Ngannou has never seen a round 3 in his UFC career. All of his fights have ended, all 6 of his fights have ended before the 3rd round. But a lot of times cardio is not determined by who has, you know, who did the most running, but who's controlling the pace of the fight. You know, who's dictating the pace. And I think that's what's going to determine who's going to get tired in this fight. But I think definitely the cardio advantage on paper has to go to Stipe, because we've seen him go 3 rounds, we've seen him go 5 rounds against some of the best fighters in the division. The last category is fight IQ, and again, this is a very difficult one because, you know, Stipe is not getting the respect that he deserves, in my opinion. You know, he is a fearsome champion. A lot of hype is being, you know, built around Francis Ngannou, and for a good reason. But Stipe is a very, very intelligent fighter. I mean, he's definitely a fighter who's shown a lot of maturity, who's shown a lot of improvement and evolution. You know, from his first fight in the UFC to, you know, present day as champion. We've seen him get tested early on. We've seen him get tired and lose to Stefan Struve, and he hasn't gotten tired since. We've seen him lose a hard round, you know, 5-round decision to Junior Dos Santos, and he hasn't lost since. You know, the second time he fought Junior Dos Santos, he dismantled him in the 1st round. It only took him about, you know, just 2-3 minutes. So he's definitely shown a lot of progression over the years. Again, I go back to the, you know, Shane Del Rosario fight where he was losing in the 1st round and he immediately switched, took the fight to the ground and beat him up there. Against Mark Hunt, you know, he immediately took Hunt down, you know, 2nd round, 3rd round, and just beat him up there where he knew he had an advantage. So if the fight is not going, you know, in his direction, he definitely can switch gears and take the fight to where he wants to go. So definitely Stipe has a high fight IQ. But Francis Ngannou, even though he's relatively new in his MMA career, not only has a high fight IQ, but he is also someone who's shown tremendous progression in such a short amount of time. And that's what's so impressive and scary about Francis Ngannou. Because when he made his debut back in 2015, there was a lot of holes in his game. You know, I don't think a lot of people actually saw those early fights against Luis Enrique, Curtis Blaydes. Enrique actually took Ngannou down, and Ngannou could not get back up to his feet, basically. And the referee actually had to stand him back up. And I believe the referee stood him up too quickly and kind of saved Ngannou's ass in that one. But you know, the referee actually had to stand him up. When Luis Enrique actually had Ngannou against the fence, he actually did not have the underhooks, and he just could not get off the fence. And again, the referee had to separate it and bring it back to the center of the cage. So that was definitely a hole in Ngannou's game in his UFC debut. And in his next fight, you know, Curtis Blaydes, when he took Ngannou down, Ngannou immediately popped back up to his feet. He just exploded. You know, that was a massive improvement. I'm sure Curtis was watching the first fight and thinking, well, I'm a junior college champion. I can take him down and keep him down. But he could not do that. He was immediately back to his feet. When he put him against the fence, Ngannou immediately had the underhooks, and he was able to just push away. So just from that one fight, he showed tremendous improvement in his wrestling. And another thing that I'm very impressed about is his English. I mean, that shows in my opinion, some high intelligence, because when he made his debut, he could not speak English. You know, he needed a translator. Now it sounds like he speaks fluent English. You know, yeah, he has an accent, but he understands everything. He speaks in English. So he only did that in 2 years, which is pretty goddamn impressive. And again, his progression, in my opinion, it's almost like John Jones. You know, when John Jones made his UFC debut, it wasn't that impressive, but you know, in his next fight and the fight after that, he was just like, the evolution that he made was incredible. And this guy, Francis Ngannou, is almost like that, because he is just improving the mistakes that he made in his first fight and his second fight he is no longer making. So this is really, again, very, very difficult in my opinion. I'm going to have to actually give both of them a check mark on the fight IQ department. Couple of things, you know, you take a look at the quality of opponents they beat. You know, Stipe has beaten some world beaters, and he's beaten the world beaters at the top of their game. Now, they both have wins over Andrei Arlovski, but the difference is the Andrei Arlovski that Stipe fought was on a 6-fight win streak. You know, the Andrei Arlovski that Stipe beaten was on the verge of getting a title shot. The Andrei Arlovski that Francis Ngannou beat had lost 3 in a row. So, it's not the same Andrei Arlovski. And also, the Alistair Overeem that Stipe beaten was on a 4-fight win streak. The Alistair Overeem that Ngannou beat was on a 2-fight win streak, and his last win against Verdun really could have been a loss. So, you know, it was really iffy. Definitely the Overeem that Stipe fought was a much better fighter. So, on paper, Stipe has fought and beaten much tougher world-class opponents. Whereas Francis Ngannou, there were only, you know, top 10 heavyweight that he's beaten, but the mark he left on that was incredible. I mean, you saw that knockout. It was scary. And like I said, you know, he doesn't hit hard, he hits scary. I think this really matters. I think this is a very, very difficult fight to call. You know, Stipe has already tied the record for the most consecutive title defenses in the heavyweight division, which is only 2. And the UFC heavyweight division is like the oldest division, you know, besides the open weight. It's the oldest division in UFC history. And the fact that it only has 2 title defenses should tell you, you know, it is difficult to maintain that belt. We've had some great heavyweight fighters, but, you know, not even Kane, who was supposed to be the next, you know, Fedor, or Verdun, who beat Fedor. None of them could, you know, defend the belt more than 2 times. If history says anything, it's saying that Stipe is not gonna defend the belt, but if anybody can defend the belt 3 times, it's definitely Stipe. You know, if Stipe comes to this fight and he fights like Alistair Overeem, meaning that he is almost fighting scared, right? He's not committing to his punches, because the Alistair Overeem that fought Francis Ngannou was not the same Overeem that fought Brock Lesnar. You know, he was not the same Overeem that fought, you know, Todd Duffy, where Overeem just came at him like a lion. He was very cautious. Too cautious. When he was throwing punches, he was, you know, dipping his head all the way down. He got caught with that uppercut. If Stipe fights like that, he's gonna lose. He's gonna lose quickly. But Stipe fights like the way he's been fighting, where he's stalking the opponent, where he's coming forward. It's gonna be a difficult night for Francis. You know, Francis is a guy who comes forward, and I don't think either of these guys fights well backing down. A guy who has great top control, right? If you're a guy, someone like John Fitch, or you know, a fighter that has great top game, you're not going to have a great bottom game, because you're never on the bottom. You're always on top. So if you're ever on the bottom, you're going to struggle. And we actually saw that when Francis Ngannou fought Curtis Blaydes, where Curtis was actually charging forward, and as Ngannou was trying to fight backwards, he actually wasn't doing so well, and he actually got caught a few times. In this fight, really, you know, who's going to dictate the pace? Who's going to come forward, you know, because the guy that's backing away, the guy that's trying to not engage, is the guy that's going to lose. You know, is Stipe scared? You know, who has the mental edge? Because Ngannou is just full of himself. I mean, he really has all the confidence in the world right now. He's saying that Stipe is scared, that he's going to try to survive. You know, does he really believe that? Is he being overconfident? Stipe seems to pay no attention to it. Does he really mean it? Is he not scared? So I think all those is going to come into factor. But again, the guy who comes forward, who tries to, because they're very identical. They're both pressure fighters. They're both big punchers. I think the difference, like I said, was that Stipe throws straight punches, and Ngannou throws, you know, he especially loves to throw this uppercut where he goes all the way down. So if Stipe is ever dipping his head all the way down, he's definitely going to get caught with that uppercut. He has to kind of, you know, keep his chin down, his hands up, and move forward. And I think Stipe will definitely try to take this fight to the ground, trying to wear him down. I do see Ngannou kind of slowing down as the rounds go, because this is going to be the first time he's fighting in a 5-round, and he might start to panic if he doesn't finish the fight in the first 2 rounds, because he doesn't know if he can go 5 rounds. Stipe does know that, and that's one advantage that Stipe has. My prediction for the fight, I see it either going one of two ways. Either Stipe comes forward, he's the one that puts on the pressure, right? He's the one that actually backs down Francis Ngannou. He doesn't fight scared. If he does that, he's going to win. I'm going to say 4th round TKO win for Stipe if he fights the way he's supposed to fight. If he fights the way that he's been fighting in the last, 2 years. But if he fights the way all of Francis Ngannou's opponents have been fighting, where he is not engaging, he's not moving forward, he's moving back, he's dipping his head down low, right? He's not committing to his punches, he's putting his hands all the way over there, and his head's all the way back, he's going to get caught with that uppercut and he's going to lose in the 1st round. So that's my prediction. Either a quick 1st round knockout for Francis Ngannou, or a 4th round victory for Stipe Miocic. But I will go ahead and pick the champion, Stipe, to win this fight. But I would not be surprised if Ngannou blasts him in the 1st round. Thank you so much for watching my breakdown. If you haven't seen the co-main event breakdown, Daniel Cormier versus Volkan Oezdemir, I'm going to put the link in the description box, so make sure you check that out. And I will be posting a live fight reaction, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can catch that. And please leave a comment in the comment section of who you think is going to win and why.